which was hosted by the United Kingdom. Gavi does incredibly important work around the globe, delivering vaccines to some of the world's most vulnerable. They've also been helping developed countries to respond to outbreaks like COVID-19. Gavi saves lives, and Canada is doing its part. Now I want to turn to what is happening later today. This afternoon, we'll be releasing new modelling on COVID-19 in Canada. We'll have more details then, but for now I want to talk about the main takeaways for these projections. The data shows that we are continuing to make progress in the fight against this virus. In many communities, the number of new cases is low, and we can trace where they came from. That's an encouraging sign that the virus is slowing and in some places even stopping. But I want to be very clear. We're not out of the woods. The pandemic is still threatening the health and safety of Canadians. Across the country, and especially in areas where we continue to see large numbers of cases, of new cases, as well as in places like long-term care facilities and seniors' homes, the situation remains serious. So while we start loosening some restrictions, we also have to strengthen other measures like testing and contact tracing. And as people head back to work, it's even more important that we keep a 2-meter distance from others, wash our hands, and wear a mask where physical distancing is not always possible. This is key to keeping us safe and keeping the situation under control.
Later today, we will be making public the latest projections. The good news is that the data show that we are clearly slowing the spread of the virus across the country. But we're not out of the woods yet. COVID-19 is still a threat to the health and safety of Canadians. The situation remains serious, particularly in regions where there are a lot of new cases and in long-term care facilities and seniors' homes. So even though we're starting to reopen the economy to a certain extent, we must tighten up other activities such as contact tracing and testing. As people return to work, that will become even more important. We will have to continue to wash our hands, keep a 2-meter distance from others, and wear a mask where physical distancing is not always possible. In other words, we will or may lose the progress we've made if we don't, and thus we must continue to protect our seniors. Even if we're starting to reopen the economy now, our parents and grandparents must continue to stay home as much as possible. Confinement has an impact on their mental health, on their personal finances, and their quality of life.
When this crisis first started, our seniors could count on a strong public pension system for steady income. The Canada Pension Plan, Old Age Security, and the Guaranteed Income Supplement were our first line of defense. But over time, this pandemic has made life more expensive. Seniors haven't been able to take public transit. They haven't been able to go to a store or shop the sales because of the virus. Instead, they've had to rely on deliveries to get things they need, and it adds up. And what makes things even harder is the fact that this is the new normal for many of them, at least for a little while. Even as we start to reopen parts of the economy, many seniors will have to stay home for longer to protect their health. And that's really weighing on them. So our government stepped up to help them weather this storm. In April, more than 4 million low-income seniors received a GST credit top-up worth an average of $375 for people who are single and $510 for couples, automatically in their bank accounts. This was a first step. We also announced that people receiving old age security would get an extra $300 to offset some of the extra costs they've had to cover because of the virus. And to give even more support to low-income seniors, we said that seniors on the Guaranteed Income Supplement would get an additional $200. That means if you are one of the 2.2 million elders receiving both OAS and GIS, you'll get an additional $500 to help you with everyday expenses. And today, I can confirm that you'll be getting that money the week of July 6th. This COVID crisis is tough on seniors, and that's why these additional funds will make a difference, with up to $900 for single seniors and up to $1,500 for couples.
Since this crisis began, we have taken a number of steps to help seniors with their daily expenses. In April, more than 4 million seniors with a low income received more money directly into their bank account when we provided GST credit top-up. We're talking about $375 on average for single seniors and $510 for couples. We also announced that we would provide an extra $300 to people on OAS and an additional $200 to people who are also on the Guaranteed Income Supplement. And today, I can confirm that people will receive that money in the week of July 6th. So, in all, because of this crisis, seniors alone could receive up to $900 and couples could receive up to $1,500. At the same time, we are supporting programs and organizations that improve the quality of life of seniors. For example, we are investing in the New Horizons program to allow affiliated organizations to adjust their services to the realities of the pandemic and help people to stay in contact with their families. We are also providing funding to partners such as the United Way, Community Partnership, and the Red Cross to provide additional services to vulnerable seniors. Now, as we're looking to reopen the economy, we must not forget that we're not all in the same circumstances. A lot of people, including elders, will have to remain vigilant and follow the specific public health advice in order to protect their health, and our government will be there to support them. Later tonight, I will be talking to the premiers of the provinces and territories at our weekly call. We will be continuing the discussions we began last week on reopening the economy safely, including funding that was announced for the municipalities earlier this week. Once again, thank you for being with us.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, on va commencer la période de questions aujourd'hui par le téléphone. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Thank you. Merci. First question, Kate Belangaro, Bloomberg. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. You've delayed the decision on whether to ban Huawei from Canada's 5G networks. All of our Five Eyes allies have done it. Canadian companies are deciding not to work with them. Are you delaying this because you're afraid of Xi Jinping, yes or no?
Every step of the way, we have listened to our security agencies, our intelligence services, worked with our allies. We will make the right decision for Canadians to both keep Canadians and businesses safe, while at the same time ensuring competitiveness in our telecom industry.
At every step of the way, we have been following the recommendations of our intelligence agencies and other experts. We are working with our colleagues right around the world on this particular issue. We want to ensure that we can protect Canadians and businesses while remaining competitive in the telecom sector.
You've spent a lot of time campaigning for a spot for Canada on the UN Security Council. There are some concerns that Canada is too close to the U.S. to get a seat and will simply promote the American agenda. Is it fair to consider Canada an American Trojan horse at the UN, yes or no?
I think we have demonstrated over the past years with our deep commitment to multilateralism, our commitment to progressive trade in this era of globalization. We've become the only G7 country that has a free trade deal with every single other G7 country. We know that engaging around the world is important both for Canadians' health and well-being, but also for the good of our economy. We have done that consistently. Over the past years, I've been stepping up on drawing together questions around financing for development in small island developing states and in Africa. These are things that Canadians have done in the past and will continue to do because we know that it makes a difference. Even as some of our allies, including the United States, seem to withdraw from the world, Canada is engaging in strong and confident ways as Canadians expect us to.
Merci. Opérateur, next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Raymond Filion, TVA. À vous.
Thank you. Good morning, Prime Minister. Your long silence on Tuesday caused a lot of people to be talking and speculating about what it meant. Could you please explain? Well, I think everyone is looking at what is happening in the United States with tremendous concern and anxiety, and we will continue both to follow what's happening in the U.S., but also to look at what we can and must do in our own country. Canadians are facing discrimination every single day, and we need to have a government there to respond to the challenges they face. And that means working all together to be better allies, and that's what we will do.
Canadians continue to watch with consternation and horror what's going on in the United States right now, but that can't keep us from looking very carefully at our own systems and the work that we need to do to make sure that the millions of Canadians who face discrimination and intolerance every single day in their lived reality get better support, have Canadians come forward as allies, have a government that continues to work with them to break down barriers and make sure that everyone is treated with respect and given all the opportunities that others have.
En suivi, Raymond?
Follow up? A lot of people interpreted your silence as a nonverbal denunciation of President Trump. Is that the case? Well, I think Canadians expect that I be there to defend their interests and their values. That's what I've always done in relation to the United States and in relation to every country around the globe, and I will continue to do that.
Canadians expect their Prime Minister to stand up for their values and their interests, and that's what I've done my entire time as Prime Minister, whether it be with the United States or with other countries around the world.
Thank you. Opérateur, prochaine question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Merci, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. About the Army in the long-term care facilities, you set a deadline. Now, can you tell us whether you've made a decision and whether you're going to extend that deadline? Well, I first want to reassure seniors in Quebec that the government will be there for them. We've been there right from the beginning with the Army. We're still there, and we will continue to provide help and support in various ways so that we can get through these tough times. The discussions are still underway with the government of Quebec as to how Canada can help, but we will be there. Follow up, Mélanie. But what exactly is your offer? To send in fewer soldiers or to provide 4 additional months of help from the Army? Well, our priority is to ensure that seniors in Quebec are properly protected and are receiving the care that is necessary during this pandemic and this difficult situation. Canada will continue to support Quebec to regain control of the situation in those centres and of the system as a whole. And we are currently in discussion with the province as to the best way to accomplish that.
We will ensure that elders in Quebec are given the protection and the support that they need. We have been there, we are there, and we will continue to help out. We're in discussions right now with the province of Quebec on how we can best help as we move forward to ensure that all seniors in Quebec are properly cared for.
Merci. Opérateur, dernière question au téléphone.
Thank you. Merci. Last question, Andrea Gunn, The Chronicle Herald. Line open.
Hi there, Prime Minister. The Nova Scotia government is saying that they will complete an inquiry, a public inquiry into the shooting that occurred in April, but only if the federal government launches it and takes a lead on it. Is that something that your government is prepared to do?
We have been in very close conversation with the provincial government on this. We recognize that Nova Scotians and indeed all Canadians have significant questions about what happened. The RCMP is continuing its detailed investigation into the events, but there also needs to be a larger review. Canada will work with Nova Scotia on ensuring that it happens in the right way.
As a follow-up?
So you're committing to doing some sort of public or a review with the province on this?
We know people have questions that need answering. We will work with Nova Scotia to make sure that happens.
Bonjour, Philippe Vincent Foisy de Radio-Canada.
Radio-Canada,
il y a plusieurs personnes qui ont critiqué votre silence, que ce soit Yves-François Blanchet qui a dit que vous manquiez de colonne, Job Meeting qui a dit que c'était
Mr.
hypocrite
Blanchet
parce que
was
quand il y a
saying
des
you
gens
have
qui sont
no
intimidés,
backbone.
le
Some people
silence, ça ne les
saying
aide
it's
pas, il faut se lever
hypocritical.
debout et les
And
défendre.
some people are saying silence is no good. You have to stand up and defend people. And other people are saying it wouldn't take me 20 seconds to denounce what's happening. Why can you not denounce what is currently happening in the United States when the black community needs allies? You say you're an ally, but all you're giving them is silence. Well, Canada will continue to support and stand up for all minorities right across the country and across the world. That's what we've always done and we will always do. My job as a Prime Minister is to defend Canadian values and to stand up for our principles, but at the same time protect the interests of all Canadians and help Canadians, and that's what I always do. As a government, we have done a great deal by working with the black community here in Canada, but we still have a lot to do, and we will continue to work.
My job as Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians' values, to express those values, and to ensure that I'm standing up for Canadians' interests as well, and I'm defending those interests. I will continue to do that. In regards to defending racialized Canadians and supporting people all around the world in the fight against racism, I will continue to do that. We have done much hand in hand with the black community over these past years on supporting them, on reducing barriers, but we recognize there is much more to do here in Canada, right across the country. We will continue to do that work.
Vous dites que vous venez debout, mais
you say that you're standing up for them, but
Est-ce que ce
it's through
silence-là
your
est dû à la
silence.
peur que
Now,
vous
is that
avez
because
du
of
gouvernement et de l'administration Trump,
your
que si vous
concern
dites
about
un mot
offending the
déplacé,
Trump
un mot qui
administration,
pourrait
maybe
irriter le
saying the
président,
wrong thing that might irritate the president and that could lead to repercussions on the border or free trade? Is that what you're afraid of? Are you afraid you might make some offensive comments like at the G7 that would upset our neighbor to the south? My job is to defend Canadians and ensure that everyone is familiar with the values of all Canadians here and around the world. That's what I've been doing, and that's what I will always do.
Stand up for Canadians' well-being and Canadians' interests while making it very clear what Canadians' values are. That's exactly what I've done.
Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Video emerged this week of an RCMP officer in Nunavut driving his truck into an Inuk man. That follows a pattern of police brutality in the province, with 3 police-involved shootings and 2 fatalities since February. What is your response to the video in particular, and who should be held accountable for this?
We recognize in Canada that there are systemic discrimination problems, that we need to address our justice system. We need to address challenges in our society that are a lived reality for racialized Canadians, for Indigenous Canadians. Even as we watch with horror what's going on in the United States, we know we have an awful lot of work to do right here in Canada. As a government, we have taken steps towards that, but as you point out, there's much more to do.
And
We acknowledged that Canada is facing systemic discrimination that affects our justice system and many of our institutions and circumstances that affect Canadians of various origins. And that's why, as a government, we have taken concrete action in recent years, but we do realize there's still much more to be done, and we will continue to work to be better allies to all Canadians, Black Canadians and those of other visible minorities.
Sending to Indigenous people when you are responding to my questions with a talking point you've used all week, rather than responding to the video. You say you are responding to what's happening in the U.S. with horror and consternation, and you're not expressing those same things for what's happening in your own country.
I have said from the very beginning that Canada is not immune or exempt from the things that we see going on in the United States. Racialized Canadians, Indigenous Canadians have long suffered systemic discrimination in every part of this country. And even though we have taken significant steps over the past years, there is much more to do. And the events of these past weeks in Canada and in the United States have underlined how much more work we have to do, and we will be there to do it hand in hand as allies to the Black community, to Indigenous peoples, and to all racialized Canadians.
Hello, Prime Minister. It's Annie Bergeron-Oliver with CTV National News. Many Black Lives Matter advocates are demanding that governments defund police and instead redirect that money into disadvantaged communities. The mayor of LA, for example, announced that they will be cutting the LAPD's budget by hundreds of millions of dollars. Are you willing to cut the RCMP's budget?
I think there are many different paths towards making a better country, and we need to explore the range of them. We need to look at what's appropriate in Canada, how we can best keep Canadians safe, and how we can best address the systemic racism that exists in far too many parts of our country and far too many of our institutions. We will do that as a government. We will ensure that we are supporting community organizations that need support, supporting anti-Black racism programs, supporting Indigenous peoples, as well as doing the things we need to do to keep all Canadians safe.
Does that mean you're open to it?
We need to look at what is appropriate in Canada, and I think we need to continue to work on ways with the communities affected, with Indigenous peoples, with racialized Canadians, to take the measures that they need. We have put significant funding towards frontline organizations in the Black community. We have funded Indigenous communities significantly. There is more to do, and we will focus on that.
On a separate subject, it is now illegal in Hong Kong to insult the national anthem. It's a move that's widely seen as yet another infringement on freedom of expression. What specifically is Canada doing to push back against this escalation and to ensure that people fleeing prosecution in Hong Kong are welcomed in Canada?
We have worked with some of our closest allies, including the UK, Australia, and others, to condemn the actions taken by China in Hong Kong. We are extremely concerned with their stepping away from the one country, two systems agreement that was signed a few decades ago. We need to ensure that rights are defended all around the world, including in Hong Kong. We will continue to be a country that is open and welcoming to people fleeing persecution and violence. We
have been working with our allies around the world to express our deep concern about what's happening in Hong Kong. We have an obligation to retain the principles of two systems, one country, and unfortunately, Beijing is moving away from that principle, and we're very concerned about the 300,000 Canadians in Hong Kong who, of course, would be welcome to return to Canada at any time. But we also have a system here that welcomes people fleeing persecution and violence from around the world.
Minister Janet Silver, Global News. Staying with China, will your government bar Chinese passenger planes arriving from China, arriving here in Canada, as the U.S. has done, and to pick up on what you were saying with regards to Hong Kong and protecting human rights? Will you join parliamentarians in Kanzac countries to demand a special human rights envoy to monitor human rights in Hong Kong?
We are going to continue to make the international flights measures in place protect Canadians. We have taken significant steps to ensure that COVID-19 does not get transported across international borders into Canada. We will continue to keep the appropriate measures in place based on public health recommendations, based on expert assessments of what is needed to do to keep Canadians safe from COVID-19. We continue to work with partners and allies around the world on ways to ensure that China knows that its actions in Hong Kong are deeply troubling, are of real concern for the sake of people in Hong Kong, but elsewhere around the world as well. We will continue to speak up strongly and be there for people who are worried about their futures in Hong Kong.
We will continue to work with our international partners to talk about our concerns regarding the decisions being made by China about Hong Kong. With respect to international flights, we will continue to follow experts' recommendations as to what we must do to ensure the protection and safety of Canadians from COVID-19.
Harry, CBC. I'd like to take it back to Huawei. A top spokesperson at the U.S. State Department said today that if Canada allows Huawei into its 5G network and into its national security systems, the U.S. is going to have to make an assessment as to whether it can continue to share intelligence with Canada. Now, you've been mulling this over for a long time. You've said you're taking all security factors into account. You've said you're talking to security agencies, Canada's security agencies. You've said you're speaking to the allies. So I'd like to ask you specifically, are you prepared to risk losing access to U.S. intelligence if you go ahead and allow Huawei in?
These are considerations that we have been looking very carefully at. Obviously, conversations have been extensive with all our Five Eyes allies, including the United States, as we continue to work with our security services and intelligence agencies on the right path forward for Canada.
As I've said a number of times, we are continuing our discussions with allies, including the United States, on this decision. We will continue to listen to the recommendations from our security and intelligence agencies in order to make the right decision for all Canadians. Thank you all very much.
And that is the Prime Minister of Canada on this Thursday with his daily briefing on the pandemic, giving us a couple of hints around the modeling data that we expect to hear more about at the top of the hour, showing that there are the country is making progress, but asking Canadians to still continue doing what we have been doing for so many months: physical distancing, washing